The air in the conference room was thick with the scent of lemon oil and old paper, the kind that clings to secrets and polished wood. I hadn't been here since Grandpa Merrick's health began to fade, but his promise dragged me back. My mother, ever poised, fiddled with her pearl necklace, her manicured nails catching the light. My father sat rigid, arms crossed, ready for war. Kalia, my sister, wore a cream blouse too perfect for mourning, her half-smile sharp as a blade. When Mr. Halpern, Grandpa's lawyer of 30 years, opened the will, his voice cut through the tension. Serafina Wynne, sole heir to $38 million. The room froze. Then chaos erupted. My father snatched the check, lit a match, and watched it burn. My mother tore the envelope to shreds, spitting venom about betrayal. I just smiled. They had no idea what they'd really burned. Want to uncover the truth behind this family drama? Hit that subscribe button and join Serafina's fight for her legacy. The ashes of the burned check still lingered in my mind as I stood in that sterile conference room, my family's venomous words echoing like a bad song on repeat. My father's voice, sharp and final, had once cut deeper than any flame. If you walk out that door, you don't walk back in. I was 19 then, standing at the edge of their world, choosing a path they couldn't comprehend. I'd turned down a full-ride scholarship to my father's alma mater, a prestigious business school where he'd envisioned me climbing corporate ladders in his shadow. Instead, I enrolled in a small liberal arts college upstate, chasing a degree in visual design, a hobby with delusions, he called it. My mother didn't argue. She just stood behind him, lips pressed into a thin line, her silence louder than any lecture. That was the beginning of the end. 3 weeks later, I came home for Thanksgiving, my suitcase dragging behind me like a confession. The house felt different, colder, as if it had been holding its breath since I left. I pushed open the door to my bedroom, expecting the familiar clutter of my books and sketches. Instead, I found a guest room sterile, impersonal, with 2 gray armchairs, a faux orchid in a ceramic pot, and a framed lighthouse print I'd never seen before. My desk, my bed, even the bookshelf where Grandpa Merrick used to slip notes between the pages of my favorite novels, they were gone. The doorplate, once engraved with Serafina, now read, Guest Room A. My sister Kalia brushed past me in the hallway, her laugh sharp and careless. "Don't be so dramatic," she said, tossing her hair. "It's not like you were using it." The rejection wasn't a single blow but a slow bleed. At first, it was subtle missed birthday cards, calls that went unanswered, emails left unread. Then, the rent checks from my parents stopped arriving. I was 20, living in a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper, juggling part-time jobs and student loans. When I called my mother, her voice was ice over the line. "Actions have consequences, Sarah. You wanted independence. Now you have it." I would have lost everything, my apartment, my dreams, my footing if Grandpa Merrick hadn't stepped in. 2 days later, a wire transfer hit my account. The exact amount I needed, no questions asked. After that, the money came like clockwork, not lavish, just enough to keep the lights on and the heat running. With it came letters, written in his shaky, elegant script, each one a lifeline. Grandpa never judged me for leaving. He didn't ask me to crawl back to my parents' expectations. His letters were short but heavy with meaning, filled with stories of his own youth, of choices he'd made against the grain. "Survival isn't weakness," he wrote in one, sent 3 weeks before he passed. "It's the first proof of strength." I carried that letter in my wallet, its edges worn from countless readings, through every job, rejection, every silent holiday, every night I spent pretending I didn't care. He saw me not the daughter who'd failed my parents, not the sister Kalia mocked, but me, Sarafina, the quiet dreamer who refused to bend. His words were a shield, and his money a bridge, keeping me afloat when my family tried to drown me. As the ashes of that fake check cooled on the conference room table, my hand slipped into my coat, fingers brushing the envelope Grandpa had given me a month before he died. It was still there, untouched, a secret they'd never suspected. My parents thought they'd burned my future, but they didn't know the half of it. Grandpa had planned for this moment, his final gift hidden in plain sight. I smiled, not because I'd won, but because they'd underestimated us both. The real fight was just beginning, and I was ready to play by his rules. The weight of that moment in the conference room clung to me like damp air as I sat in my apartment, staring at the envelope. My family's betrayal wasn't new, but it still stung, a bruise I'd learned to live with. I thought back to the summer after high school, when I'd sat at our mahogany dining table, nervously sketching designs while my father lectured me about legacy. "The Wynn name means something," he'd said, his voice heavy with expectation. "You don't throw that away for doodles." My mother had nodded, her pearl earrings glinting under the chandelier. Kalia, barely 16, had smirked from across the table, already perfecting her role as the golden child. I'd wanted to scream, to tell them my art wasn't a whim but a calling, but I stayed silent. That was my mistake, thinking silence would protect me. When I left for college, I didn't just leave home. I left their version of me behind. The first year was brutal, late nights in the studio, ramen dinners, and the constant ache of being unmoored. My parents' rejection wasn't just emotional, it was logistical. They'd cut me off, piece by piece, until I was scraping by. But Grandpa Merrick never wavered. His letters arrived like clockwork, tucked into plain envelopes with no return address. Each one felt like a conversation, his words weaving stories of his own rebellion, a young man who'd defied his father to build a life on his terms. "You're not alone," he wrote once, "even when it feels like it." Those words carried me through the loneliest nights, when I wondered if I'd made the right choice. The USB drive in my hand felt like an extension of those letters, a final message from a man who'd known exactly how this would play out. As I clicked through the files, I saw his signature, bold and deliberate, on the trust transfer form. He'd outsmarted them all, turning their greed into a trap. My parents thought they'd erased me, but they'd only burned a piece of paper. The real legacy was mine, and I was ready to claim it. The apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city. I locked the door behind me, my heels discarded in a heap by the entrance, and sank into a chair, my coat draped across my lap like a shield. My fingers trembled, not from fear but from the weight of what I held, the envelope Grandpa Merrick had given me. A month before he passed, handed over in a dimly lit booth at Hillstone Diner, wrapped in a cloth napkin like some sacred artifact. His voice had been low, almost conspiratorial, when he'd said, "Don't open it unless they burn it." And they had. My parents had torched the check in front of me, their faces twisted with righteous fury, thinking they'd erased my claim to Grandpa's legacy. But as I broke the wax seal, the embossed MW crumbling under my touch, I knew they'd only burned a shadow. Inside was a check, nearly identical to the one my father had set ablaze 38 punto. Dos cuatro seis dólares, 000. Grandpa's signature scrawled in bold ink. But this one was stamped in tiny red letters. Non-negotiably copy. Taped to the back was a small USB drive and a note in Grandpa's blocky handwriting. "Let them burn it. Then open the real file." My heart thudded as I plugged the USB into my laptop. No password, no loading screen, just a single folder labeled Inheritance. I clicked, and a PDF appeared, a trust transfer form. Signed, witnessed, and filed through a law firm I'd never heard of. The account number ended in digits I'd known since childhood. Grandpa's birthday. Reversed. The transfer had happened weeks ago, before his death, before the conference room showdown. The check they'd burned was a decoy, a trap set by a man who'd known his family's greed would blind them. I leaned back, the silence in my apartment wrapping around me like a blanket. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about a grandfather who'd seen through the polished veneer of his own kin. but the weight of his plans settled heavily on my shoulders, and I wondered what else he'd foreseen. The next morning, I tried to check my bank balance, a habit born of years scraping by. The screen blinked, then flashed an error. Account not found. My stomach dropped. I tried another card declined. I refreshed, typed slower, as if precision could fix the glitch. Nothing. A cold dread crept in as I dialed the bank. The clerk's voice was polite but hesitant. "I'm sorry, Miss Wynne," he said, keys clacking in the background. "Our system has your account marked inactive. Deceased, actually." My mouth went dry. "That's a mistake," I managed, but he paused. "It was certified by the registrar's office, dated 2 weeks ago." I hung up before my voice could crack, my mind racing. Deceased? I drove to the DMV, the clerk's pitying glance burning as she confirmed it. "You're flagged as legally deceased, Serafina Letwin. Death certificate filed. The process to correct it," she said, "could take months." I stumbled out into the cold, the world tilting as if someone had rewritten its rules. Across the street, a woman stood under a row of bare trees, her oversized sunglasses glinting despite the gray sky. A pale blue silk scarf looped around her neck, the same scarf my mother swore the dry cleaners lost 3 years ago. She didn't move, didn't smile, just watched. I stepped into the flow of pedestrians, my pace deliberate, and when I glanced back, she was gone. My family wasn't just after the money. They were erasing me, piece by piece, as if I'd never existed. Back home, I rifled through the drawer where I kept Grandpa's letters, laying them out like a map. Each one was a reminder of his faith in me, a thread connecting me to the truth. But it was the brass key, tucked in a worn handkerchief since my 18th birthday, that called to me now. "You'll need this. Someday," Grandpa had said, "when you're ready to claim yourself." That day had come. Langford Private Vaults was a nondescript building nestled between a wine shop and a dusty bookstore, its unmarked door blending into the historic district's charm. The woman at the desk barely glanced at the key before leading me down a chilled corridor to a room lined with metal drawers. "Box 17, she said, sliding it open and leaving me alone. Inside was a black fireproof folder, its surface cold to the touch. I opened it, my breath catching. A certified cashier's check, real this time, with the bank seal embedded in the paper $38 million, addressed to me. Next were notarized land deeds, transferring ownership of the family estate's underlying property, and stock certificates for Wynne Carroll Holdings, every voting share, every executive authority, all in my name. At the bottom, a flash drive in a velvet pouch. I clutched the folder, my heart pounding. Grandpa hadn't just protected me. He'd armed me. My family thought they could erase me, but they'd underestimated the man who'd raised them. He'd seen their betrayal coming, and he'd built a fortress around me. As I drove home, the city lights blurring past, I realized this was bigger than a check or a trust. It was about legacy, about a name they tried to strip away. My parents and Kalia thought they'd won, but they'd left a trail sloppy, arrogant, and waiting to be exposed. The flash drive burned in my pocket, a promise of what was to come. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for myself, for the girl Grandpa saw when no one else did. And I was ready to step into the light. The black fireproof folder from Langford Private Vaults lay heavy in my hands. As I stood in my apartment, the city's hum a faint pulse beyond the window. My fingers traced the smooth surface, steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Inside was a certified cashier's check $38 million, the real one this time, its bank seal glinting like a promise. Beneath it were notarized land deeds, for the family estate's sprawling property and stock certificates for Wynne Carroll Holdings. Every voting share, every ounce of executive power, signed over to me, Serafina Letwin. Tucked at the bottom, in a velvet pouch, was a flash drive. I slid it into my laptop, my breath catching as Grandpa Merrick's face filled the screen. He sat in his sunroom, light pouring over his shoulder, his eyes tired but sharp. "If you're seeing this, Sarah," he said, his voice steady as stone, "they tried to erase you." He spoke slowly, each word deliberate, as if he'd rehearsed this moment for years. "You were always the quiet one, the one who saw everything, felt too much, asked for nothing. That's why they feared you. That's why I trusted you." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing through the screen. "This isn't just money. It's memory. It's legacy. If they tried to burn yours down, this is how you come back." The video faded to black, and I sat frozen, his words sinking into me like roots. Grandpa hadn't just left me his fortune. He'd left me a blueprint to reclaim my place. I wasn't just fighting for wealth. I was fighting for the truth he'd seen in me when no one else did. The next clue came in an envelope taped beneath my apartment's peephole, plain white, with no stamp, only a single line in neat block letters. They didn't burn the real check. "Look in box array at Langford Security." No signature, just silence beyond the door. My pulse quickened. Langford had multiple vaults, but box array rang a bell Grandpa's old joke about where they hide the real bones. I logged into the estate email he'd set up during the trust transfer, finding a message I'd overlooked. The subject was blank, the body just one sentence. "They're not after the money, they're after the signature." Attached were 2 documents: an unsigned asset transfer form for Wynne Carroll Holdings and another, signed, with my name. But the signature wasn't mine. They'd forged it, planning to sell the company out from under me. I opened the company's internal dashboard, using the access Grandpa had quietly granted months before. There it was. Transactions, proposals, asset reassignments, all approved under my name while I was legally deceased. They hadn't just disinherited. They'd turned me into a ghost, a loophole to exploit. Their arrogance was their mistake, leaving a trail as bold as it was sloppy. I reached for the flash drive again, opening a folder labeled Charleston Land Archives. My name was listed under every plot, every acre of the family estate. Grandpa had ensured I held the foundation of their power, and they didn't even know. The brass key from my 18th birthday, wrapped in a worn handkerchief, felt heavier now. Grandpa had said I'd need it to claim myself. I drove past the city limits, through rusted farmland to a row of storage units, stopping at number 19B. The lock clicked open, revealing a fireproof briefcase. Inside was my original birth certificate, Serafina Let Wynne. No hyphen, no stepfather's name, and 12 letters from Grandpa, each dated around key moments. My college graduation, my parents' vow renewal, the Christmas I spent alone. "They won't erase you," he wrote repeatedly. "Not while I'm still standing." Beneath the letters was a notarized will, dated after my supposed death, naming me sole beneficiary. The deed to the Wynne estate in Charleston, South Carolina, bore my name in bold. I wasn't just an heir, I held the ground they stood on. Sylvia Orton, my lawyer, didn't flinch when I handed her the briefcase. Her eyes scanned the documents with a predator's focus. "We'll move fast," she said, her voice all business. Within 48 hours, we filed the challenge. The courthouse smelled of waxed floors and old decisions, and I wore black not for mourning, but as armor. My parents arrived with a young lawyer, his suit too tight, his smirk too loose. Kalia trailed behind, her glossy lips and phone betraying her detachment. Judge Kinley, known for his no-nonsense rulings, nodded to Sylvia. "We contest the execution of Merrick Wynne's estate," she said, "on grounds of forgery, coercion, and identity suppression." The opposing counsel scoffed, calling it emotional nonsense. But Sylvia tapped her tablet, and the courtroom dimmed. Grandpa's face appeared on the screen. "If they're watching this," he said. "They tried to bury her." His voice silenced the room. "I made Serafina sole heir because she earned it, because she endured." Kalia's jaw dropped. My mother paled. My father shifted, but Judge Kinley's raised hand stopped him cold. "You didn't just manipulate this court," he said, his voice like ice. "You tried to erase a person." He turned to me. "This court recognizes Serafina Wynn as the sole legal heir. Their assets were frozen, pending investigation." I exhaled, not from relief, but release. The reckoning had begun. Kalia texted me twice, her words clumsy with desperation. I met her at a cafe near the courthouse, neutral ground. She stirred an untouched coffee, her smile trembling. "I didn't know about the death certificate," she said, voice cracking. "They told me it was routine. I just signed where Dad said." I set my phone on the table, screen dark but recording. "I swear, Sarah, I didn't mean for this." She wiped a tear with her expensive sleeve, but I felt nothing. "I thought we were protecting what was ours," she said. I repeated, "What was yours?" She flinched. "I didn't think you'd fight." That was true, but I wasn't that girl anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I stood, pocketed my phone, and walked away, her voice fading behind me. Outside, the air smelled of rain, and I knew I was done looking back. The courthouse steps stretched out before me, quieter than I'd imagined, the old concrete cool beneath my boots. In my hand was the deed to the Wynn estate, my name etched in bold beneath the county seal. No more doubts, no more shadows. I paused at the bottom step, turning to face the building where I'd fought to be heard. Holding the deed aloft, I snapped a single photo, my expression still, not smiling, just steady. Later, I captioned it, "They tried to burn the legacy. I inherited the foundation." Then I powered off my phone and slipped it into my bag. No fanfare, no victory lap, just the weight of truth settling into place. 5 blocks away, I unlocked the door to a small brick studio I'd closed on days earlier. Its tall windows and scuffed floors tucked between a florist and a laundromat. It was modest, but it was mine. Inside an envelope from Grandpa's vault, I found a hand-drawn blueprint of the studio, a half-completed business license, and a letter with 4 words underlined, "Make something they can't erase." Sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor, I felt the storm of loss and triumph settle. This wasn't revenge, it was a beginning. Want to see more stories of resilience and justice? Subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the journey.